The LGBT charity Stonewall has had a torrid few months. Some of its former supporters have been highly critical of its transgender campaigning, which stands accused of siding with trans militants and alienating feminists. Well, now, thanks to a Freedom of Information request, the extent to which Stonewall's agenda is advanced at the expense of your tax pounds has been revealed. Research by the Taxpayers Alliance has shown that hundreds of publicly funded organisations, from universities to government departments, have paid the lobby group more than £1 million a year for diversity advice. The lion's share of the cash has gone on to Stonewall's Diversity Champions scheme, which has been lambasted by some of its critics for its position on transgender rights. Well, Tom Slater of Spiked is here to talk about this. Tom, hi to you. Actually, just as a sort of point to begin with, I think the general public would always be surprised by just how much taxpayers' cash goes to charities generally. A lot of charities get their income, part of their income, from the taxpayer. So that's not the story here. The story is the fact that Stonewall is seen as deeply partial now on this contested issue of trans rights versus what some old, in quotes, old-fashioned feminists think about things.
No, that's exactly it. As you say, there's nothing wrong or strange about the third sector being brought in to train government departments, publicly funded institutions, or to advise on matters of policy. It's just here this is much more controversial, not only because of the sums that we're talking about, £1 million plus a year of taxpayers' money being funneled into this diversity champion scheme, which has actually been the focus for a lot of the controversy that's come Stonewall's way, but also the role that scheme is seen to play in informing policy and actually limiting discussion about a lot of these issues. Back in May, there was a report from the University of Essex. 2/3 of universities, it turns out, are using this scheme. And at Essex, they found that the high-profile no platforming of two gender-critical feminists, that is, feminists who believe in the reality of biological sex, was in some respects informed by this arrangement because their policies were being looked at by Stonewall, they were being vetted, and a version of Stonewall's version of the law, which isn't really the letter of the law, essentially made them feel that no platforming these feminists was legitimate, if not required, as a matter of course. So I think this is the problem here, is that, as you say, there's nothing unusual about reaching out to the third sector. But when you're talking about a third sector organisation that is actively limiting discussion about an incredibly contentious issue and enforcing an orthodoxy that I think most of those taxpayers wouldn't support, that is definitely going to be a huge problem, understandably.
Yeah, limited discussion is exactly what it's all about, Tom, isn't it? I mean, if you are in the human resources department of a major Whitehall department or a big business, a big corporate entity, you don't want to make those decisions yourself. I mean, heavens above, it becomes a matter of democracy where you, for instance, ask the people who work for you, not just the highly credentialed, highly networked people at the top of the tree, but the security guards and the chefs and the cleaners, whether they think that they should start using certain pronouns, etc., etc. You might get an answer you don't want. Better to stick with what you've been told by Stonewall.
Well, I think that's exactly the point. I mean, that's one of the insidious aspects to this that people don't really touch upon, because when you're talking about these pronoun policies or discussions about how people address one another, you're effectively creating a situation in which people, could be a cleaner, could be an academic, could be anyone, should be disciplined for saying what they believe to be the truth, for voicing a belief in biological sex, for instance, which is shared by the vast majority of the population. And that's one of the problems with Stonewall, is that it functions through its various schemes as a kind of kite mark for public institutions, for companies. If you meet their criteria, you're entered into their equality index, all the rest of it. This has essentially become the kind of quasi-official standard for whether or not you're a good company, whether or not the people who run that company
You're exactly right. It's like health and safety, isn't it? It's like the kite mark you'd get for making sure that everybody knew where the fire escapes were, or where to assemble in the event of a smoke alarm going off.
Well, this is exactly it. And yet what we're talking about here is effectively pushing an ideology that says that sex and gender is a question entirely of self-identification. So what you believe yourself to be is what you are, which suggests that if people don't want to accept pronouns or don't want to engage in some of the kind of pronoun sharing that we might have heard in some instances, that they should be ostracised for that. That's a problem, and it's something which I'm amazed that people haven't picked up on until this point. We're starting to see some of that kickback now, it feels like.
Tom, Andrew Doyle's on holiday this week. He couldn't do this, he goes on. But you've got 20 seconds to explain why curry, the word curry, is colonialist.
Yes, so this comes from an American food blogger who's put out a video suggesting that the word curry is colonialist, in the sense racist, because of the fact that it's kind of a term that just British people use as a catch-all for Indian cuisine, not actually giving reflection to the wide diversity of cuisine there. It's the sort of thing what you see often in the culture wars, that she has a bit of a point, but really so often we're talking about very small issues which in the grand scheme of things really don't matter, really don't offend that many people, and this is a classic example of that.
There you go. Andrew, if you're watching from home, that's how it's done. Tom, thanks very much indeed. Tom Slater.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.